Hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the Fiction Blueprint podcast. Thanks for joining me today. Before I get started, just a quick note. I'm not going to have a visual element to the podcast today. Usually I do a video as well. If you usually listen to the podcast, then there's no change for you. But if you usually watch this on YouTube, I am going to be putting this on YouTube. But like I said, I am not in front of my camera, so we're just doing the audio element today. And I wanted to talk about why getting your book written seems to feel so hard all the time, right? We just have a hard time. Sometimes it's a matter of having a really dynamite premise, but not knowing where we're going with it, right? We get frustrated, sometimes embarrassed that we can't finish something, and we end up with either drawers or files, usually in the case of us, in the digital age, just files on our computer of half-written, abandoned projects, right? We over-research or go down craft rabbit holes. I talk about this a lot, right? The endless rabbit holes of free online writing advice, but we can also do this with craft books, binge watching craft videos on YouTube, and just in general, being stuck in perfection, feeling like you need to learn more before you can actually get started or before you can finish that scene. Sometimes we write and rewrite the same scenes. We re-outline the same story from scratch, hoping we'll get fresh inspiration. But at the end of the day, it still doesn't really do much to help us, right? And then there are the actual distractions. Sometimes there are things in our lives that really need doing. So it's very easy to clean the kitchen, organize a closet, before we get our writing done, and then it never gets done. And, let's not even get started on the whole, I'll just hop on social media for a minute. Yeah, right. Famous last words, right? Sometimes things like timers help. But what I find is that usually timers help with people who already have things pretty well dialed in. And if you don't, timers don't necessarily give you everything that you need, right? And then sometimes even if we get something written, when we reread it, it feels trite or amateurish, like maybe a junior high schooler wrote it or something like that. And, compared to your favorite books, you're just thinking, why does theirs sound so professional and mine doesn't? So you endlessly self-edit instead of actually finishing your book. And sometimes when you sit down to write, you don't even know what the problem is. Maybe you know what you're going to write. Maybe you're pretty confident and you still just feel this resistance to getting started. And that is probably an energetic block more than anything else. Okay. So no matter how much you pep talk yourself or how good your intentions to get those words written this week, sometimes it's just hard, right? So if any of these things feel like you, or if you've experienced any of them or anything close to any of them, a version of any of them, then just know that you are not alone and you are amongst friends, because this is the kind of thing that gets to all of us. Everybody goes through this a little bit. But the question I want to address today is why? Why does it have to be so hard? Why isn't it easier to just go through a step-by-step process and get our stories written? Well, in order to understand that, I want you to imagine something. Imagine you decide to go to school, like college, to become a physicist. Now, I just picked this profession out of the air. You can replace it with any profession you would prefer, okay? But something other than a writer, something that you would actually need to go to college for, take courses for, that sort of thing, okay? So we're going to go with physicist today. You really don't know a whole lot about being a physicist other than the basic science you learned in high school, but it's something that you have passion for and that you want to pursue as, a life's interest. So that's why you're going to college for it. Now, the curriculum to learn to be a physicist consists of classes and lectures, of course, pretty thick science books that you pretty much need to memorize all the information in. And then, of course, there's time spent in the lab doing hands-on experiments, scientific works, hypotheses, the scientific method, all of that. And if you don't attend all of that, if you don't have all of those experiences under your belt, you're not going to be able to graduate and get a job as a physicist. The tests the professors give you will show that you know the material, but they also need to see that you can explain things rather than just regurgitate them, that you can set them up in real world scenarios, that you've logged hours in the lab so that you know your way around a lab bench, right? And all of the things that go along with that. And all of that is really important to becoming a successful physicist. So now I want you to imagine trying to become a physicist without any of that. Like, imagine just sitting down with a physics test, or maybe going into the lab and having them give you a problem and telling you to set it up and show it to them. And you just have to figure out answers based on what you already know. You probably wouldn't get many of the answers correct, would you? You probably wouldn't set up the experiment or the lab thing, whatever they're having you do, correctly, would you? No, because you need that information. You need everything they teach you in the classroom and in the lab to learn the material. Otherwise, you're not going to know what you're doing. But that is basically what we do when it comes to writing. We assume that because we read a lot, it means that we're going to be an awesome writer. Just going to sit down, write a story beginning to end, and become famous, right? And don't get me wrong, reading a lot definitely is a great prerequisite to becoming an exceptional writer, for sure, for sure. But it does not mean that automatically we are going to be amazing writers, flawless writers that just know how to do it. That's not the way it works. So I want you to think of all of your reading as a prerequisite. Think of it as your high school level education. But the reason you go to higher education, the reason you have to learn more beyond that, and in any setting, sometimes people don't go to college, sometimes they do online learning, sometimes they do hands-on learning, but whatever it is, you can't expect to know how to do everything if you've never been taught everything before in whatever setting you choose to learn that in, right? But that's basically what we're doing with writing. So Albert Einstein, or at least this has been famously attributed to him, said that you can't solve a problem from the same mindset that the problem came from. And the way that I apply that to writing is that you can't write a book, create a really cohesive, well-told story from the mindset of a reader. That reading is fantastic, and it is the foundation, the prerequisite for becoming a great author. But it is not the work of becoming a great author. You have to rise above the level of the reader and learn to tell a story from the author perspective, not from the reader perspective. And when we all get started, we are trying to tell a story from the reader perspective. That is to say, we're trying to tell it from the plot, rather from the true backbone and foundation and nature of the story. And most of us don't even realize that. We don't even realize what we don't realize, right? We don't know what we don't know. And that's why it's so difficult to write a story. Now, if we go back to this physics example, think about everything that goes into a physics education. Of course, there is the book learning, there is the test taking and the lectures and the classroom stuff, but there's also the hands-on stuff, right? Not only what they learn in the lab, how they learn to put things together, experientially in the 3D physical, but also just showing up, right? Just logging the hours in the lab is really important for accountability so that people can see that they have experience doing this. And then, we could also talk about people who drop out of college. They drop out of physicist school, right? And there could be a million reasons for that. I'm not going to necessarily try to get them all under the same umbrella, but maybe some people go into physics school and then have a lot of doubts because it's harder than they thought it was, or they thought that they wanted to do this for the rest of their life, but they decide, partway through, maybe this really isn't for me. The point is that sometimes there are emotional or spiritual things going on that is keeping them from pursuing that education. And that really has nothing to do with the education itself. It has to do with them, right? Well, the same thing is true of writing. Part of the reason it's hard is because, number one, there's not a whole lot of teaching about how to create a truly, well, let me approach this a little bit differently. We're told what we need to do, but not how to do it in our writing. So for example, we are told we need to write a story that hooks the reader, but how do you do that? I mean, most people don't have a really specific example. You just have to keep going until you find something that hooks the reader. And that is taking shots in the dark. That is 1-800 dial a prayer that you'll eventually figure out good writing. Okay. That's not much of a strategy if you ask me. We don't really know what hooks a reader, or at least we're not told that by most people. The answer, if you're wondering, is emotion. That is actually what hooks a reader. It's not action. It's not shocking circumstances. Okay, it's not even romance. It is emotion that will hook the reader every single time. And once you know that, of course, every story is going to be different. So it's not like, oh, just write the sentence and you're good. It's going to depend. But once you know that, you can work toward that. After that, you need to have some kind of plan for writing a highly emotional story. And no, once again, it's not, oh, I'm just going to go sit down and write my story and I'll just make sure to make it emotional. Because when we do that without any kind of concrete plan and are just kind of flying by the seat of our pants with the emotion, we tend to not do it very well, okay? That would be the same as the physicist going in for a test in the lab who has never stepped foot in a lab before and gone, oh, I'll just figure it out. I mean, that's not a strategy. And chances are, even if you do figure it out, it's not going to be particularly good, particularly skillful, right? So you need like a step-by-step plan for how to get emotion into every part of your story. And as I harp on all the time, you need emotion in every part of your story. You need it not just in the characters, not just within a particular scene, although those are both important. You need it in the world building. You need it in the transformation. You need it in the internal arc. You need it in the theme. You need it in every single area of your story. And once again, that's a lot of areas, right? That's a lot of things to keep track of if you don't have some sort of plan, okay? But we're not taught that. We're taught, oh, just sit down and get your first draft written. And while that's not bad advice, for a lot of people, they do just need to push through and get it written, like 100%, I understand. Usually that first draft is going to be pretty hairy, right? It's not going to be the best, and that's okay. You can write your first draft that way and then go back and edit, but that's what I'm talking about. When we go back to edit, we need to have this plan for how to get things into our stories, for like a checklist that we can make sure that we're doing everything so that we're not just hoping we remember everything off the top of our head, right? Most people sit down to edit and they just read through their story. And while we can definitely do a lot of editing that way, catch a lot of things, we're still missing a lot of things doing that because we're not being intentional enough, okay? So that makes it hard to write our stories. If you have a great idea for a story premise, but you don't know where you're going with it, if you're having a really hard time filling in plot events or finishing your current WIP, or if you're constantly worried that your story is boring or dragging or that your readers won't like it, then I encourage you to join the Legendary Fiction Forge, my monthly membership for fiction authors. Inside, I will give you the complete A to Z blueprint for how to write highly emotional stories that your readers will absolutely fall in love with, no matter what your genre or tropes are. Want to become a widely read, highly paid master storyteller? Then join us in the Legendary Fiction Forge and finally get that epic story that's been knocking around in your brain forever out to the world. Then there's the accountability. Remember when I talked about them logging hours at the lab? So many of us, and I am 100% guilty of this, say, oh yeah, I'm good. I'll get my story written. I'll just make sure that I do it. But it's not really that simple for most of us, right? I famously took more than one semester off college back when I was in college to, quote, get my book written, unquote. And most of the time at the end of the semester, I had like 2 pages, right? I had not hardly done anything. And it's not even a matter of being lazy. I mean, it could be that, but it's more a matter of habits. And, you know, when you sit down and try to force yourself to write and you haven't created those really good writing habits yet, I don't want to say it's not your fault, but in a lot of ways, it's almost not your fault. You know what I mean? Again, it's not a willpower thing. It's not a you're so lazy or you're so stupid or you're not creative enough thing. That's not what's going on. It's that, you know, like anything, like exercise or eating habits or study habits or any money habits, anything like that, we have to create habits. And if we haven't done that, it's going to be almost impossible for us to show up and log the hours, right? So that's why accountability is such a good thing. Have a writing partner, have a writing group, have something that you need to send pages to every week. It makes a huge difference in how much writing you get done. Most of my time in college and when I started out, I had a writing group every week and we were supposed to send pages every week. And while we were not super strict about it, nobody got in trouble for not sending pages and we all had weeks where we didn't, just knowing that I had a group that was going to read it for me and that I needed to send pages by this day, that kept me writing and that kept me accountable. And that single-handedly made sure I finally finished the books that I was working on. Okay, so accountability is huge. Please don't make the mistake of saying, I'm one of those people who'll just get it done. I mean, maybe you are, but 99% of new writers who say that are convinced that they are, and really they're not, okay? Chances are you're the exception, not the rule. And that's okay. We just need to set up some kind of accountability for ourselves until we get those habits, and then it won't matter so much anymore, okay? Finally, I talked about emotional and spiritual things going on. Sometimes we have so much resistance to our writing. We sit down and we just can't get in the right mindset to write, and we don't know what's wrong with us, but we just can't seem to get the words out. Now, there's a lot of reasons why this may happen. It may happen because you don't know where you're going with your story. And if you don't know what to write, your brain is a whole lot more likely to turn off and be like, nope, not doing it. Okay. If you know what you're going to write, and especially if you have a lot of passion and emotion in what you're going to write, you're much more likely to sit down and write it. And we can prove that by looking back. I mean, I'm sure we've all had the experience where there's a particular scene that we are so stoked to write. We cannot wait to sit down and write that because it's going to be fantastic. And that's because we're excited about it and we're feeling the emotion of it. So of course we want to sit down and write that. But if there's a scene where we don't know what's going to happen, then our brain starts to stress out because we don't know what to write there. Or maybe it's a scene that we are thinking is a little boring, and so we don't really want to write it. We're not that excited about it. And then, lo and behold, it's harder to sit down and write it, right? So here's what I always tell people. And it's a little bit hard, I think, for some people to wrap their heads around this, but I want you to really be open-minded here. All of us should being the operative word, be able to sit down and write a book beginning to end with no problem, okay? Of course, we would have to plan it out first, but let's say all of the things being equal, we have planned out what we're going to write, we know exactly what's going into the book, we have a lot of passion for it, we're really excited about it, okay? All other things being equal, we should be able to sit down and write that thing beginning to end, no problem. No stopping, no stalling out. I mean, you can stop in terms of... you don't want to be awake for 80 hours writing this thing, right? But I mean, every day you could just sit down, no problem, no resistance, just write until it's finished, right? But we all know, I'm sure you all know, that is not the way it happens for most of us. We all have resistance, and sometimes we just don't know what it is. But what you probably don't realize is that is emotional or spiritual resistance that is based in personal trauma, and it probably has nothing to do with writing. So it could be that sometime in the past someone told you writing was stupid, or you're never going to make a living at that, or even criticized your writing, said it wasn't very good. Okay, so that could be the origin of this resistance, but it may also have nothing to do with writing. It may have to do with someone making fun of you when you were 10 years old and telling you you were an idiot, and now in general you have imposter syndrome and you think you're an idiot and you think that your writing isn't good enough. And that is a trauma that needs to be healed. And once you heal that, then the resistance to your writing will go away. If you're wondering at all, usually when we have resistance like that to something, it doesn't show up in the same area of life that birthed it. So what I mean is, that's why a lot of times having doubts over your own writing isn't because somebody once was overly harsh or critical about your writing. It's usually coming from some other area of life, but it permeates all areas of your life. So it's going to show up in certain places. I'm not good enough, this is stupid, what if they're bored? All of that is coming from a resistance from some other trauma or limiting belief that happened in your life. And we are now in the mainstream getting to know these things and getting to understand them more. But in the past, we really haven't. So in the past, we would say things like, the muse is very capricious and only comes to a lucky few, and everyone else basically has writer's block. And nobody really ever knew why. Scientifically, it wasn't anything that anybody could really understand, but we do understand it now. And writer's block really isn't a thing. I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, right? If you tap into your unique subconscious creativity, that is an endless supply and you will never get writer's block. But if you're feeling resistance, not so much block as in, I don't know what to write about, but block as in, I'm having such a hard time sitting down at my computer and pounding out the words, that's coming from some other part of your life in which you have an unhealed trauma. And once you can get that trauma healed, the resistance to your writing will melt away. Now, you also have to do all the work. I would, like I said, recommend planning, knowing how you're going to get that emotion in there, because not knowing how to do something is another reason that our brain freezes up. But this is what I mean when I say it's hard to write a novel. It's not just hard because, I don't know how my story is going to end. Like, that can be hard. That can be one of the reasons, right? Or, you know, some variation of that. I'm stuck in the saggy middle, or I don't know where I'm going with this character. You know, I have a premise, but I don't know where it's going to end up. But even once you figure those things out, there's so much more to it, right? There is accountability. There is energetic blocks because of trauma. There is all this different stuff. I mean, no wonder everyone has a hard time writing books. And anyone who has sat down and successfully written one, you need to pat yourself on the back. You are a freaking rock star to have figured this out. But it's a lot, and it can be very difficult. So just understand, number one, that you're a rock star for even trying. And I know that you feel called to do this because there is so much difficulty here that if you didn't, if you were just like so-so, maybe, I don't know, you would have given up a long time ago. You would have sat down to write a paragraph and then been like, you know what, this is hard, I'm done. And most people in the world, like 75%, have write a book as part of their bucket list for life, and only like less than 1% of the population will ever actually do it, right? So that makes you special, and it means that you are on a road that is difficult, but also very doable. You're here for a reason. You're listening to this podcast for a reason, all right? And my goal as a fiction coach and fiction consultant is to help you get that book written in the most natural, relaxed, and effortless way possible. I am never going to claim that writing is not work, but it should be fun work. It should be relaxing work. It should be work that you really, really enjoy. So to that end, I am doing a free workshop next week. It is called 4 Secret Keys to Finishing an Intensely Emotional Novel that will rock your reader's world, in 6 months or less. Like I said, this workshop is free. There is an option for a VIP if that's something you're interested in. But it's a 3-day event, and the 3 trainings, the 3 days, will all be included as part of the free workshop. On day 1, we're going to talk about the real thing that hooks readers and keeps them turning pages all night. Hint, it's not action or sex. Day 2, the hidden reasons you keep stalling out on your draft and how to fix them. And then day 3 is also named for the name of the workshop, 4 Secret Keys to Finishing an Intensely Emotional Novel that will rock your reader's world in 6 months or less. Okay? So if any of what I've said today has resonated with you, if you have found yourself in any of these situations or anything that's even a little bit like them, then I encourage you to sign up for this workshop and meet me there. And I'm going to do everything I can to educate you about why it is so difficult to get your book written and how to fix those things so that you can finally make the headway that you are longing to make. I do not have the registration page URL in front of me, so I will put it in the show notes. You will be able to find it there. And like I say, 3-day workshop next week. There will be replays available, but only for 72 hours. And yeah, I just hope to see you all there because my goal is to help as many writers as possible to get their books written. I really do believe that writing transformational fiction is so helpful to our readers. It changes people. It helps them to feel their emotions. It helps to up-level them in ways that you probably don't realize. So I really want to help as many writers as possible get their books out into the world, to get them finished, and more than that, to write a book that is highly emotional, very hooky, as we say to readers, and one that the writer can be proud of. Okay, I don't want you putting something out into the world that you're worried is subpar. That's not any fun. So I hope you will join me for this workshop, and thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. Make sure that you are following the show if you don't want to miss an episode, but I'm going to be doing this workshop next week, and I hope to see you there, okay? Beyond that, have a wonderful week of writing, and remember that you have a story inside you that only you can tell, and your readers, even now, are scrolling Amazon looking for it. So let's get to writing those novels, shall we? All right, talk to you guys next week. Bye.